This is Identity at the Center.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jim McDonald. Unfortunately, Jeff Stedman wasn't able to make this episode. He is braving the elements in North Carolina, driving to Charlotte today. And today is March 16th, and there's all kinds of wacky weather that he's dealing with. So we'll wish him the best and wish him safety on his travels. I'm going to be joined today by a special guest, but before I get to all that, I wanted to go over some kind of key updates and key dates and reminders. We've got Identity Management Day, which Jeff and I have been a part of in terms of bringing on the director for, I think, pretty much since Identity Management Day started. Anyway, it's April 14th of 2026 this year. And Jeff and I will actually be a part of it. We're going to do a live podcast as part of Identity Management Day. So make sure you tune in for that. You can watch the live podcast. We're also hoping to have a recording so folks who can't see us live can experience that podcast later. We're going to be at a couple of conferences upcoming. So the European Identity and Cloud Conference put on by Huber Cole is in Berlin. That's May 19th through the 22nd. IDAC 25MKO is the code that will get you 25% off. All you have to do is go to our website, idacpodcast.com. Anytime you can get all of our discount codes, all the information about different conferences that either both of us or one of us are going to be at, and get those discount codes and direct links to go and register. But that's going to be a fantastic time for anybody who's there. We also are going to attend all the Identity events that we can. I know there's going to be one prior to EIC. There's also going to be one prior to Identiverse. That's in Las Vegas, June 15th through the 18th. To get 25% off of that one, it's IDV26-IDAC25%. So again, go to our website and you get all the latest podcast discount codes. Conference discount codes. Our guest today is, like I said, is a very special guest. This is somebody that we've been talking to for a long time about coming on the podcast. His name is Greg Handrick. He's the director of IAM or IAM at Best Buy. Welcome to the show, Greg.
Thank you very much, Jim. Pleasure to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you.
Been listening to you for a long time, so exciting to finally be on.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad to have you on the podcast today. And, I mentioned to you before the show, this podcast has really grown internationally, and only 33% roughly of our listener base is based in the United States. So we have a large global presence, and I don't know how much of a global presence Best Buy has, but I'm assuming there's some listeners who aren't familiar with Best Buy. So maybe you can give us a little bit of background on what Best Buy is.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, we are domestic U.S. only. So we are about the last standing consumer electronics retailer. So everything from computers, TVs, audio equipment, high-end home audio, car stereos, washers, dryers, all the appliances you need for your home, and all the accessories that go with those things, and then a ton of services to service those things. So for it in the U.S., we are well known, but outside of this, probably people don't know us.
Yeah, and I think Jeff shops and spends like half of his paycheck at Best Buy. I'm sure he would love his own little discount code for Best Buy. So if you work that out for him, that would be fantastic. But we would not be under such pressure, actually. So this is your first time on the podcast, Greg. Got to ask you, how did you get into identity? Did you choose it, or did it choose you?
I've been around a long time, and I definitely chose identity. I used to say that I've been in identity since before the word identity, but I actually started back early in my career as an Oracle DBA and database developer, but then in the office got into helping people get access to the network file shares. And so it was Novell NetWare at the time. And I ended up learning about Novell NetWare, and then learning we were switching over from token ring to this new thing called 10-base-T networking. So I actually got in the wiring closet, learned how that worked. And it was just starting to connect people to stuff. And so it was always about the users and what they needed to do their jobs. So I'll give a brief history of my long, colorful career. But I translated that to a consulting gig with Novell. And then from there, landed at a manufacturing firm, which was nationally located. We had a bunch of sites, but I was the network services manager, which meant I got to learn not only the local area network, wide area network stuff, but routers, switches, firewalls, all those things, data center operations. So I had this big infrastructure background between, power, space, cooling, all those things, racking servers, racking storage, telephone equipment, all the things, learning about help desk and again, getting people access to the things they needed. And then from there, working for a large international manufacturer and doing a lot of project management for them. A lot of projects that were cross-divisional, international, super hard, or things that had failed before, and we got to step in and rescue. From there, I got to be exposed to quality control, IT service management, and a bunch of different ways of looking at access, at technology. I got to become actually in one part of that role, SAP Security Administrator, which is my first exposure to true security. From there, went to a couple other different companies where I got to be exposed to a whole lot more PCI, HIPAA, high trust, capability maturity models, a whole bunch of different IT frameworks, COBIT, different ways of looking at the world, different lenses. And again, it's always about the business and about getting people around the business the things they need to do their job. Had my first role where I actually had the title Identity and Access Management at Best Buy, actually in 2011. And from there, we were very operationally focused. It was just about getting the users set up, getting their access into apps, and then and making sure that was done quickly and accurately. But security didn't matter so much. So then, following the retail Armageddon that Amazon introduced to retail, I left Best Buy in 2014. Got to do a whole bunch of consulting, but used all those different frameworks and security systems and things that I picked up, all that different terminology from working across all kinds of different parts of the business, and was always drawn back to those situations where it was getting people access to the systems they needed. So identity was always there, but now layering in, are we doing it in a SOX compliant way? Are we doing it in a PCI compliant way? Are we doing it with whatever the regulatory framework of the moment was? And then after a couple more identity roles, actually got to boomerang back into Best Buy and step back into the team that I had left 7 years prior. And there's some stories there because got to see all the things that we had started back in the day when we were actually trying to make it a real formal identity and access management program, and then see how the promise that we had and the hope for all those systems that we were putting in 2014, how that changed over the course of 7 years, and then got to see what it became.
I can tell from that story, there's no way in the beginning you could have drawn the line from here to there, but somehow you made it all the way to the director role over the IAM program at Best Buy. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who are in the beginning of their career who are very interested to know, like, well, can I just follow the path that you followed to get here? And it's like, there's no way you could repeat that, right?
Absolutely not. And again, identity didn't exist when I started, but it is now. What I love about identity, and as it grew on me over the years, is that we have this unique perspective in the organization. We touch every single person in the company, from the security guard at the front desk all the way to the CEO. with very personal access to what they need to do their jobs. It is now called identity security, and it is about security, but it's also about compliance. It's about some human resources in day one. How's that person get into their role? Do they have all the things they need to do to be productive early on? It's about that user's experience. How does that look? And it's about the compliance pieces, and it's the operational accuracy, efficiency, and can we audit the current set of permissions across the entire environment at any given time?
Well, I think it's like the range of experiences you had over time, kind of talk about different frameworks you worked with, and all the time you were like serving this internal customer and trying to make it so that identity security didn't become a hurdle for them, or at least not something that held them back from doing their job. And so to me, there's no one path for what makes a good identity program leader. And I've been a program leader. My path looks different. Jeff has been a program leader. His path is different, and your path is different. One thing I found interesting is like now that you are the identity program leader, as we talked, and I wanted to make this kind of like one of the top things that we talked about in the show, which was the organization. And so one thing you mentioned to me that was totally different is that, or I shouldn't say it's totally different, but totally different from my background and Jeff's background, is that your role reports into the CIO, and the CISO is more of a like a stakeholder to your program. And I wanted to get like from you like how that works and what the pros and cons are in your mind in terms of that approach.
Sure. For Best Buy, it's always been that way. The identity program started off it was called credentialing and privileging. And so they were focused just on setting up an account and getting the person into the application. So it was always that operational aspect. When you're talking, we're about 100,000 person organization. And so a lot of people coming in and need access fast, and they just wanted that efficient. And so adding on the security piece of it was sort of an afterthought. Adding on the compliance piece of it was an afterthought. But now that we're here and now that we are more mature in this space, I think it's all pro to be reporting up through the CIO side of the org, because security, compliance, they are our stakeholders. They provide the framework. They provide the rules and the standards that we have to abide by. And so I'm free to actually use them as a hammer when we want to drive some new thing in. We can say, oh, security needs us to do that. So just don't blame me for this thing. It's security's fault. But also I get to feed back to security and say, wait a minute, I totally understand where you're coming from and why we need to do whatever it is you're asking to do, but here's the impact. And so can we change this rollout? Can we steer this? Can we guide it to make it just a little easier for the organization to accept? And so that's been a benefit. You have to be aware that that's the role you're playing, and that you do have these stakeholders. And I think because you're trying to manage all of the things, if you let any one of those stakeholders get too out of balance, things are not going to go well. So if I just said, oh no, operationally that security thing you're trying to do is too hard, we're not going to do it, I'm giving too much weight to the operation side. Or vice versa, if we let security drive all of our program responses, then it's going to get out of balance, and the customer experience is going to suffer, or something else is going to give way.
Jeff and I debated this on a recent episode, a mailbag episode, right? Because someone asked about organizationally, is it better to report to CIO or CISO? And I did bring up that I think when IAM falls under the CISO, which is the most common case, is that there's a little bit of separation of duties issues kind of baked into that, is like, where's the check and balance? Because CISO has to set up a lot of rules in terms of these are the security gates that thou shall pass your application or your enhancement through before you can go live. The application team is often making guarantees or promises up the chain that they'll go live on a certain date, things like that. And the CISO can put a stop to going live if you haven't gone through closing all your critical issues, things like that. Now the CISO is the one who made the promises, and now it's like, oh well, there's this critical issue, but it's not really that critical. Like now they're in a position where they have to either disappoint their boss or they have to they have to kind of let that critical bug go past. And I'm not saying they won't make the right decision, but they shouldn't be in that position in the first place.
Exactly. Who watches the watchers? And you don't want to put people in that position where they have to make a choice that's going to make them look bad, because everybody means well and they want to do the right thing, but it can be really tough.
In your role as the IAM program leader, do you have a steering committee? And then what is the role of that steering committee? Are they a sounding board? Are they decision makers? Where do they fit into the Tracy view, if you will?
They are both of those things, sounding board and decision makers. But it's not always been that way. And it took a while to get them to embrace that. At some point in the history, somebody got a recommendation that an identity best practice is to have a steering committee. And so the CISO and my manager, who's the CTO, actually came together, and initial steering committee meetings were sort of more like project status updates, and they were very much looking back. Here's what we did. Here's what it cost, and the problems that we had, the findings that we had. Took a while to get our program stable enough, get things running smoothly enough that we could actually start looking ahead and getting the questions that we were asking them to be difficult enough to actually engage the VPs. That executive level brain doesn't really care about provisioning accounts or doing an access certification. But when you start discussing, well, wait a minute, what's our roadmap to passwordless? What's our compliance coverage? You name an issue. They want to be more strategic. What business value are we actually adding? Can we show it, or are we just a cost center? And so when we started talking about taking friction out of the environment, driving better compliance, reducing attack surface, and how we're going to get there, all of a sudden the steering committee really became critical for us, because we needed both the security side to be giving us standards that we could drive to operationally, but then the operational feedback about how do you do zero trust? Well, you can say it, but we see where all the gaps are and where implementation challenges are. So it's been fabulous to see that shift in those meetings. And simple, it's a 1 hour meeting every 6 weeks. So if you don't have a steering committee, put one together and just put a little burden on their plate, because the feedback you get is phenomenal. The guidance that we've gotten towards implementation has made us successful. But the other thing is we've now got a partner in the executive suites. And so they can have conversations about us in the rooms where we aren't. And so when you've got senior VPs talking across the organization and somebody else saying, hey, no, identity is important and here's why you have to account for it, it makes all the difference in the world to your ability to be successful.
Yeah, identity really touches like every part of the business. So, most parts of the business ought to have some kind of input in terms of how it's touching them. I've always felt like one of the biggest benefits you can get from a steering committee is building evangelists who go out and say, hey, this thing that the identity group is doing is pretty big, but guess what? It doesn't work without our cooperation. So we are going to cooperate. Whether your stakeholder is HR or an executive who manages part of the business, or their IT stakeholders who are, operations, for example. If they're on board with your program, you don't have to twist their arm as much to get them to, hey, we want to push out this new standard. And especially if you frame or couch these issues as, hey, this is what we want to do. This is why we want to do it. The problem it's going to solve. What say you? Do you have a concern about this? Wow, now it's like you're open-minded to hear their feedback.
Exactly. And so having those evangelists is great. And then the other thing is they actually will help us sell the wins. So when we've removed password entry from, 3 or 4 applications, they can step in front of that other executive leader and say, hey, we did that for you. We took some friction out of your daily life, because those are the kinds of things that people see, and they don't always know why it happened. And so when we can say, no, that was an intentional step and we chose to make your life easier, people do appreciate it.
So, Greg, before people start sending you emails saying like, hey, I'm having problems with my password on bestbuy.com, I wanted to clarify, you do the internal workforce side of identity. You have a peer who does the external side. But that leads me to another question, because I think the other big party that a large retailer especially would deal with is third parties, suppliers, essentially. Is that in your scope? And do you think that is easier than your internal workforce, or is that just a totally hard thing to do?
Such a great question. Yes, I have enterprise, all humans and non-humans and everything but customer. So third-party suppliers, Best Buy has thousands. We have merchandise vendors. We have services vendors. Um, we also have a retail media network where we sell ads in the spaces in bestbuy.com. And so there's ads buyers are another category for us. And then we also have a marketplace. And so on bestbuy.com, you might see products that are fulfilled by Best Buy or fulfilled by a third party. And so those sellers are also among those vendor and partner identities that we track and take care of. Is it easier? In some respects, it is easier because the number is smaller than the number of humans we have inside. And the the things that they have access to is simpler. The number of entitlements is much smaller, and the number of applications is smaller. Where it gets really interesting and has been challenging for us is the number of stakeholders across that single partner experience is challenging, because we do have the marketplace and then the merchandise vendors and the other internal vendors, and then the ad side of it makes for a whole bunch of people who will come to the table, and one person will say, I got to have it this way. And 4 others say, no, you don't. And they don't want it. And so we end up with doing a lot of listening and a lot of compromising just on what that partner experience is going to be.
So, Greg, I was really happy to hear that you're a regular listener to the podcast, because really the way we've thought about the podcast from the very beginning is this is the podcast for the IAM practitioner. And Jeff and I both have the background of we've run IAM programs. So we think there are a lot of people who are either IAM program managers or who aspire to be IAM program managers. And I love that idea that you put out there about the, um, you know, going beyond the identity security piece, because what you're talking about is like enabling the business. And that's great. But somehow you have to get recognized for that, right? I mean, like, you maybe don't have to get recognized for it, but it sure is nice if you get recognized for it. And it will help your program in the future to get, if you get that visibility and you get that recognition that, this is a team that creates business value. And I'm wondering from your perspective, like, how do you keep that going? How do you keep your program visible and relevant to the business?
You raise such a great point about the identity space. And let me go back to when I started listening to the Identity at the Center podcast. I was intimidated by every guest you have on because everybody brings such depth of experience. And IAM is so big. I think it is easy to get to get a little bit of imposter syndrome because like there you could be a super technical person in access management and be able to speak about SAML and OIDC and OAuth and or maybe you're on the IGA and ILM side of it. And if you can't bridge all of it, then maybe you feel like you're failing a little bit. And so that to me was always a challenge. But identity is truly a team sport. And so no, I don't know anybody that can do all of it alone. And so how do I stay relevant? It's that because not only do within the identity space, we have to cover a whole range of solutions, but we've got business groups that are trying to do a whole range of things. And to succeed, we have to bring the right team to the problem.
So I think one of the things that, I really key in on is communicating the value of identity. And first off, it's probably a matter of people not always knowing what identity is, much less the value that it brings to the organization. So you probably experience the same thing, right? Everybody other than our groups don't wake up thinking about identity, but we do, and we need people to understand what's the importance, what's the value, right?
Right, exactly. And I think that's the way to think about it. We stay relevant by having those conversations and being actually the expert who has a role to play in business. So I think one of the things that is challenging for a lot of a lot of technologists is just to speak in simple enough terms for your audience to understand. But I think the corollary there is if I go talk to the doctor and the doctor starts throwing all the medical jargon at me, I'm not going to understand. I'm not an expert in his space. Same when I'm talking to marketing or the finance folks or the HR folks. I'm not an expert in their space. They're not an expert in mine. I wouldn't expect them to be. So we have to find ways to simplify what we do and be able to communicate it clearly so that we can exchange that business value. And I think there's a lot to be said for just spending a lot of time listening to the problems of the person on the other side of the table, getting their perspective. And then when you hear what they're facing, we can think about solutions that we can bring to them. And then that's immediately where we find value and where we add relevance.
I want to pick up on that analogy you just threw, which is like going to the doctor, because my next question is around making the value pitch and getting investment in IAM. And one thing that I found that doesn't work is FUD factor, right? So it's kind of like you go to the doctor and it's like, well, you keep eating barbecue, you're going to get cancer. And if you keep drinking, pop, you're going to end up with diabetes. The first thing you're doing after that is going to Burger King. It's just like, I just can't take this anymore. But so the question I have for you is like, how do you make the case for getting investment? Do you talk about the enablement side, ROI? Do you talk about risk mitigation? Or do you find that maybe it's contrary to what I said? Maybe FUD works for you?
Absolutely no, never FUD. Because it does not work in my experience. When I came back to Best Buy in 2021, we actually ended up doing an RFP because that system that I mentioned that had grown for 7 years when I left was not serving the business, and it was too expensive to maintain. Took too long. It wasn't hitting all the business needs. We had compliance findings, and so we actually ended up we ended up doing an RFP, selecting a new identity lifecycle management, identity governance tool. I don't know if I'm allowed to say brands here, and a single access management tool. So anyway, we went SailPoint, Ping Identity, and Microsoft AD, Active Directory, as the sole directory. So we took this big portfolio of apps and we just shrunk it all down into 3 single things. Through that, we actually got engaged with every app team because they had to standardize that. We forced a whole bunch of security standards into this thing. If you're coming out of the old directory your service account is now going to be in AD. It's going to have this naming standard. We're going to give it an owner and an alternate owner, and the password will be vaulted in the privileged access management system. So we actually were able to suddenly standardize and drive a whole bunch of efficiency improvements just by making everything repeatable. And all of a sudden, it was easier for app teams to deal with, because if an app developer moved between teams, all the standards still were the same as far as access management, single sign-on, directory, and provisioning. Since then, we haven't really had to make any investments in identity. And so we're now coming up on some with the rise of agentic, and we've got to expand our tool set to get a little better visibility in that space. But now, with the activity of the steering committee, we've already been having these conversations now for over a year. How does this look? How is this going to look? Where are the knowledge gaps? So we put together some working groups, and we figured out things, and we've gone through an RFI. We're now about to RFP. But at the point where we have to make a tool, both the CISO and the CTO are in alignment. They already know that this is the way we have to go. This entire steering committee has brought together the right people to look at the problem, and all the concerns that they would have had only one side done it are now kind of alleviated. And so there you go. That's how we make investment now.
Well, congratulations to you, because I know what that takes to pull together leadership to all get on the same page. I think one of the other big challenges that we as program leaders, and your program leader today is probably the hardest time in history to be an identity program leader, because the merging of traditional cyber and traditional identity is like, they're just merging. And the name identity at the center is more relevant now than when we started the podcast, because it's like identity is getting integrated to all the cyber tools, identifying, detecting anomalies and account takeovers and things like that. And then identity being the number one, methodology that the attackers are using to take over networks. I guess all that as a background, how do you work with your peers who do traditional cyber to make sure that identity is being included in that, and that you're taking from them, like, how do I harden my identity environment so that, I'm not causing problems for them?
I need a piece of wood to knock on to make sure that we are doing that having that conversation and staying secure. Best Buy does have several advantages over other companies, and one of them is that we are very, very centralized. We're based in Minnesota, and a lot of the team is here, so we can have conversations. Cyber is here. We're talking to each other all the time. One of the other advantages we've had is that we haven't grown a lot by acquisition, and we don't have these far-flung business units. So everybody is kind of right here. When we make decisions for the enterprise, it's done. Basically, there's not a lot of shadow IT or other divisions that we have to worry about implementing. Those are absolute blessings in my program, and I have lived in environments that didn't have those blessings, and my sympathies to the people that are trying to do this with an argumentative security group or business units that just want to go their own way, and so you can only secure about half the org or something. It's a challenge, but it comes down to, we don't think of the identity team and the operations team and the cyber team. We think of the Best Buy team. So one of the other good things about Best Buy is that our culture is focused on the external threat, rather than somebody having the internal threat of, oh, my turf is getting stepped on, or somebody didn't show me the proper respect for my role. We don't have that. Our culture is pretty healthy in that regard, and makes those conversations with the cyber team easy, because we're always looking at what's best for the company.
I think one of the things I learned since I met you, Greg, is that, You are pretty technical. And as you went through the background today, I was like, oh, he's had some pretty technical roles. I mean, you started all the way back as a DBA in the Oracle environment and kind of a Novell administrator. So you have a bit of a technical background. But one of the other things that I learned about you, because you're so sharp with your business acumen, thought this guy can't be technical. You've got the right balance, right? But you weren't born with the right balance, I'm sure. You didn't come out of college with the right balance. What have you done over time to kind of build those skills so that you can target this answer toward the person who is up and coming and wants to be in a role like yours? Like, you need to have both things, right?
Be curious. One thing I've always liked to do is when I encounter something I don't know, I say, I don't know, teach me. Or, I can learn this thing, and learn enough about it. As I've moved out, kind of away from the day-to-day technical, where I was the hands on the keyboard configuring the system, I make sure to talk to my engineers. I always want to understand what they have to do. And so it takes people a while to get used to me coming in and going, show me. No, I know the work, that ticket that's right in front of you. I want to sit and shoulder surf while you do it, so I understand the effort, how much swivel chair maybe you have to do between systems, the burden we put on when we say, no, you got to use a jump host and then pull the password from the vault, and just watching those things. And then it just asks the question, where's this running? Oh, it's running on containers. Well, teach me about containers. Where's that? Who runs that? And you go talk to that team. You go, tell me a little bit about your world. People love to tell you about their world, and it's just a great way to learn, a great way to be able to make connections between what we do and what other people do, and what are the foundations for the systems that we're running. And you end up building a network of connections that you may not understand how it will serve you today, but at some point you're going to need that connection. And so be curious, go out, just talk to people, get to know people. It will serve you in all aspects of your career.
How are you using AI in your day to day? Are you the kind of person that you're actually writing agents? Are you asking, how do you use it?
I have a little bit of FOMO when it comes to writing agents. I am probably behind where I want to be, which explains the 3 open things, training sessions I've got on my browser right now. But we are using it in our code, in our coding, and Best Buy as a whole is using. We're creating an agentic structure, and we do have experiments going on with several different models. It's been we're trying to keep those people a little bit throttled and not get too far ahead of the identity space.
So, yeah, no, I mean, we all, I think, we know this tidal wave is coming, and we're trying to balance getting good use out of it for today, but also be ready for tomorrow. I think it's changing so fast that it's hard to see where this thing's going to be in 2 years, but we know it's not going to be where it's at now, right? One of the other questions I wanted to ask you, Greg, was, you know, now shifting gears, I loved your answer about being curious. It was advice to the practitioner who's like the up and comer, wants to lead a program. Now I want you to answer this question mostly with the person who's already leading a program in mind. And I want to know, what is your philosophy as a leader of people? Because I think that's probably the biggest transition when you're no longer producing the output. You have a team of people who produce the output. In some ways, I remember making this transition myself and kind of feeling vulnerable, right? At first, you feel vulnerable because, like, I spent my whole career producing output, and now I don't produce output. All these other people are doing the work, but that's my job, is to make sure that they're producing the right output. What's your philosophy on leading people?
So I'm also a former Army officer, so I've learned a number of different ways of leading. And to me, the best is to set up conditions where people just can work freely and have psychological safety. Basically, people have to be not just a hands on the keyboard, but you need the brain that's attached to those hands. So my philosophy is, I know that I'm intelligent and I've got a lot of experience and I know a lot, but I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. So if I am the smartest person in the room, I try to invite more people into the room, or I go find a different room. And what I try to do with my team at Best Buy is let them exercise their skills, grow their own skills, and feel trusted enough to tell me when things are going wrong and to tell me what they need to grow. Richard Branson, I think, was the one who had a quote of somebody had asked him, well, what if we would train all our people and they leave? And Branson's response was, well, what if we don't train them and they stay? And so I try to set up the environment where people want to be there because their skills are being used, because they're growing, they've got challenging problems to work on, and they're trusted. Like everybody's an adult and a professional. Let's treat them like professional adults. So the more you can do that, the more you can kind of trust beyond reason and let people bring their best selves to work. The more fun you're going to have at work, the less stress you're going to have, and you can help people grow. And again, it's always worth it. Even if somebody ends up leaving your team, there's always going to be turnover. But if you've helped them achieve everything they can where they are with you, and they're now ready to fly the nest and move on, I think that's a win. And then it's also an opportunity for us to bring in somebody with new perspective, new energy, new experience to change our dynamic, challenge us, and keep us moving forward.
Hey, you're a boomerang, so it's definitely something that can happen, right?
Absolutely.
So I think you answered kind of one of my next questions, which was how do you keep people growing but keeping them motivated and wanting to stay? Um, my next question though is, um, I think people have real anxiety, especially younger folks that they're, just as they're starting their career, they're going to be replaced by AI agents that are going to do all the white collar jobs. And I guess in a lot of ways we're lucky, right? Because we've been in our career and we're, in the the last decade of our career, let's just call it that. That is like I'm kind of like, well, the AI just replaced my job. I don't, that's not the end of the world for me. But for someone who's starting out or mid career, it's a big deal. I guess, one, do you think that's something people have to worry about? And do people ever bring that concern to you? Or if they did, what would you say to them?
If they brought me the question, am I going to be replaced by AI? I think that the better question is, what can I do to be enhanced by AI? And that's the way I'm trying to think of it, because there's a little bit of nervousness always. Um, I think the basic triangle in IT is people, process, and technology. And I think even if you add AI and agents into the mix, well, what are they? They're definitely technology, but they act kind of people-ish. So the proportion changes a little bit. But I think um, the people working with AI number one, I think what we're going to do is use it to do what we do today faster, than maybe to automate things. And the processes are still going to be important. I just heard an interesting thing just this week on a podcast, and the person said that it's not when we change an existing process and speed it up that people lose their jobs and get replaced. It's when the entire paradigm shifts that all of a sudden people will be displaced. So I think near term and probably midterm, it's going to be a long time until the fundamental need for people process technology shifts to the point where we get replaced by AI. And the hope I have for the next 20 years. So
That's great. And that's a great way, an optimistic view to round this out. If you're a regular listener, you already know we like to end every episode with a ledger note where we kind of step away from the identity subject matter. And as we got to know each other, you mentioned that one of your big hobbies is doing around the house projects. And I wondered, are you just naturally handy? In other words, do you kind of know what to do? You learn from, your father or something like that? Or are you like me and you go to, and I hope my dad doesn't hear this because he's taught me a lot of things, but I've forgotten most of them or I haven't really used them because I've been in this identity world. So I haven't had to do like electrical or work on my car and for most of the time over the last 30 years. But um, are you kind of naturally handy, or do you have those skills in the past, or do you use YouTube as a crutch like I do?
So I guess I'm naturally handy because I had shop class in grade school. Um, been doing woodworking for a long time, uh, some metalworking, learned welding and that kind of thing. But my father-in-law is a builder, and so he's the guy with all the tools. And I always say, "Oh, hey, I got to do this thing," and he'd say, "Well, I'll lend you the tools and tell you how to do it." I, I was looking for him to actually do the thing for him, but I ended up doing the thing. So I have picked up a whole bunch of skills over the years. But YouTube is the greatest, absolutely. I tell my wife I am 3 videos away from knowing how to do anything, and so um, you know, one of the other things that I picked up was making gear to support my son's Boy Scout troop, and we'd had some tarps to repair and things, and I ended up learning how to make. I learned how to sew because of YouTube. So making hammocks and tarps and tents and backpacks and climbing bags and all kinds of things. Um, Final wraps for my daughter's car, YouTube. Uh, you know, spend endless hours figuring out how to do trim on my deck, embarrassing, but also YouTube. And of course, the most valuable thing on YouTube and my favorite thing to watch on YouTube is Identity at the Center podcast.
Well, I think with that, we'll get invited back, but we do our best to make sure that we have a lot of content on YouTube. I mean, one thing I'd love it is if folks who are listening to the episode could go out, find one of the shorts or find this video, just give it a like or give it a comment. Because we're trying to grow the YouTube channel. We put out video content every week, tons of shorts and things like that. And so it's kind of a labor of love. I mean, we do like doing it, but it is a labor. We put a lot of effort into it. And getting that feedback is important to, Jeff and I in terms of knowing that what we're doing is valuable and it makes sense to keep doing it. So if you get a chance to go out there, but definitely appreciate that, Greg. And I do know what you mean about the 3 videos away from learning how to do anything. I mean, I got OpenClaw up and running on my laptop in a VM, and believe me, I had to like fight my way through some old, you know, prompts that were like Linux commands that I hadn't used in quite a while, and like it was it was quite an adventure, but I could not have done it without the contributions of people putting things on YouTube. So totally know what you mean.
So then one question back for you. What is your agent doing? What are you doing with OpenCloud? How are you using AI, Jim?
How am I using AI? So I pretty much wind up being in LLMs like all the time. Couple things. One, I tried to build agents at my work. Um, the problem was like I could build agents that worked kind of within themselves, but when they had to integrate to data sources that the integrations weren't pre-created, that's where it broke. Um, my experience with OpenClaw was it was a lot harder to install than a lot of people were talking about online. And when I got it up and running, I tried to give it a few projects to do. And how do I put this nicely? The thing was stupid. I told it like, do this thing and then create me a report and email it to me. And then it ran it and then it failed. Well, why did it fail? Because me is not an email address. And I was like, okay, I didn't mean type the letter ME as my, an email to that. I meant be smart enough and use my email address. So then I had an argument with it about like who's going to fix the code to get the thing to work. And then the thing I asked it to do, it was another one of those scenarios where maybe I didn't give it enough information, but if I had like gone into gory details, like I basically told it to go into my sent mail and look for anything where my attachments were nothing but receipts and move those emails to the trash. So I was trying to free up some space. And what it wound up doing was like putting all of my emails that had attachments in the trash. I'm like, that's not what I wanted. And so I kind of gave up on it. Conceptually, it's amazing, right? And obviously, like I think OpenAI bought the software. That's where things are heading. Just I don't have a lot of time to invest in something where I'm not going to see a payback. And that's what I kind of came to the conclusion was like, cut my losses. I learned a lot getting to this point, but this thing is not productive enough. Now, what I'm excited about trying here in the next couple of weeks is Claude Cowork. Because I know with that, you can set up a lot of recurring processes and things like that. One thing I will give Clawbot was, or OpenClaw, they're calling it now, was that it connected to my WhatsApp. So I was able to message with it. I was able to tell it to do things when I was not in front of the computer, which I thought that was very cool. But by the way, folks, one thing you have to realize is like for it to be effective, you have to connect it to all the systems. So one of the connections has to be to an LLM. If you connect it to OpenAI as your LLM, it connects via a API. Well, every time you hit the API, you get charged real world money. So I know a lot of people are connecting OpenClaw to Chinese LLMs to try to save money. And I think that's, that is what it is. But, don't go into it thinking, oh, this is just a free project and it's not going to cost me anything. That's not the case.
No, I think there's a lot of power out there and there's promise of getting that harnessed, but we're still safe from being replaced by AI for a while.
Yeah. Well, I think even look, this is my thing that makes me feel safe is that building a setting up a product and making it like exist that's not the hard part. Never been the hard part in IT. It was all the integrations, and not just the technical side of the integrations, but getting the okay to do the integration and testing the integration. And someone looking at those test results and saying, yes, we can continue to move forward. When you're talking about identity, I mean, it is the ultimate middleware. You don't just, install, like I think you said, SailPoint and Ping. Like you don't just install those things and then, all the integrations just happen. Like those things take years. And it's not just the technical side. It's, getting the organization and people to be okay with like, okay, you're going to take over the logins for this system that I care for. And if it doesn't work, where are you going to be? No. And if like, I need to get access to this system, if that doesn't work, where are you going to be? So, rolling out like ERP systems, rolling out identity systems, AI's got a little while till it can do that. If it can do all the technical side, like, for people to be comfortable with it plugging in enterprise wide, we're looking at many years down the road, I think.
No doubt. It'll help with the technology, but getting the people and the process aligned with all of it is where the magic for humans.
Yeah. I put something like that on LinkedIn and not everyone agrees and that's cool. But I mean, Yeah, I'm formulating my opinion. I go back and forth because, heck, where AI was in the beginning of 2025 to the end of 2025, I mean, it was like, went from like sci-fi to, oh my gosh, is this really happening? So where's it going to be at the end of 26? It's going to be mind blowing. But again, does that mean people are going to just say, yeah, we're going to take the handbrake off? We'll see.
More to come.
More to come. Well, thanks for being on the show, Greg. We're going to wrap it up. For all the listeners, thanks for listening. If you're still on with us, check us out on the web at idacpodcast.com. We're on YouTube, idacpodcast.tv, and of course, in your favorite podcast player. Greg, thanks for being on with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right, everyone. We'll talk to y'all on the next one.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.